So, to segue, I wanted to quickly go over this for the theme of Hollywood interfering in politics. I'm sure this happens a lot, but for my channel, I of course had to cover this. I actually was going to read a quick segment from Eugenics, a short introduction, but luckily I found this in long form version. I won't be reading all of this, I'll return to it later. Nobody should be surprised about this at all, in my opinion. So, let's see. Oh, okay. So, in the abstract, Family Planning 1968, a short animated film featuring Donald Duck, was translated into at least 24 languages and viewed in the span of 2 years by nearly 1 to 4 million people around the world. Commissioned by the Rockefellers Population Council and expensively produced by Disney, and the movie represents the international family planning industry's single largest investment in the media object. It has since been perceived as largely effective in achieving its goals of promoting contraception to culturally diverse audiences, using an unusually rich collection of archival records and other previously neglected sources. We demonstrate how family planning failed to connect with a local viewership. Our historical analysis recovers the Population Council's homogenizing and infantilizing view of the global poor and critiques of this view that emanated from the global south, not just with the benefit of hindsight, but at the time. We conclude that the Rockefeller Disney collaboration was ill suited for communicating to a heterogeneous global audience, and that a misplaced optimism in animation as a universal language all but guaranteed failure. So, let's see. Family Planning, a short family animated by Walt Disney. Uh, okay. Is a touchstone for historians of global population, since Matthew Conley's fatal misconception, the struggle to control world population, re energized the field. The film has become a fixture, an irresistible opportunity to name check Donald Duck and inject some levity into otherwise sober accounts. Analysis has concentrated on salient features of the film, its construction of an ethnicity generate everyman, its consumerist message, and its coyness about contraception. It typically figured as one of the most significant products of a sustained effort to mobilize mass media in the service of international family planning. The Marxist critique of Donald Duck as an imperialist emissary from around the same time has not escaped notice. Details can be unreliable. The number of translations claimed, for instance, varies. One of the first scholars to encounter the film in the U.S. National Archives presumes a white audience, and a more recent account has Donald Duck painting images of birth control devices. He doesn't. But otherwise, the substance is accurate enough. Family Planning was produced by Disney for the Population Council, an NGO created by Donald J. Rockefeller, or John D. Rockefeller, the third in 1952, promote the nuclear family in Asia, Latin America, and Africa as part of a modernizing program rooted in direct trade-offs between fertility on the one hand and family health, wealth, happiness, and on the other. It targeted the other patter families and argued that his capacity to adequately provide for his children, not the number of his offspring, should be the measure of his manhood. I mean, whatever he wants to do, but I mean, you know, it's very complex when people think they have to do a thing versus what they actually have to do. But in tough times, people sort of had no choice but to have the farm, ton of children, uh, the more child mortality ceiling into the materialistic depth ceiling, the trade off, obviously. Okay, insights. and errors notwithstanding, historical accounts of family planning largely draw on the film itself as evidence. Scholars typically watch the film on YouTube to report and analyze its audiovisual content. In this article, by contrast, we mobilize previously neglected lines of evidence held by the Rockefeller Archive Center and elsewhere to share the new light on consequential yet hidden processes of production, circulation, and reception. In drawing from the materials at the RAC and beyond, we aim to contribute to an increasingly concerted effort to embed questions about the media and communication more centrally in global histories of reproductive politics. Family planning was a meaningful investment on the part of the Population Council, a major player on the international family planning scene. It was also a compromise with Disney, which then as now was one of the US film studios with the greatest international reach. As a historically significant and little investigated media object with a substantial paper trail, family planning represents a strategic opportunity for revisionism. Following the film, we argue, complicates the widely held assumption that by dint of its high production cost, translation into many languages, and global distribution, family planning was a highly successful tool in the effort to persuade local audiences of the safety and accessibility of contraception and the merits of small family size. In contrast, we demonstrate that faith in the universal legibility of Donald Duck, with his U.S. origin and unintelligible speech, posed a problem for the globish language of animation to which the filmmakers aspired. Globish? Okay, I've never heard this word before, honestly. Okay. Building on pioneering studies by media scholars, including Kirsten Oster and Manon Perry, our analysis more specifically extends recent historical research by Salvina Balasubramanian and Emily Merchant. As Balasubramanian and Merchant have previously argued, U.S. scientific theories and practices of mass communication become central to post Malthusian population control efforts in the Cold War. In the 1950s and 1960s, Frank Notstein's demographic transition theory crucially shifted attention from the environmental constraints of food production to national economic development. In the effort to curb global population growth, he and other demographers associated with the Office of Population Research at the Princeton and the Population Council championed mass communication as a powerful alternative to industrialization, which they perceived as proceeding too slowly to be effective in the poorest regions of non-aligned world. Mass communication in their eyes could play the role of industrialization had an earlier demographic theories. Mass media took center stage not merely as a handmaiden, but as an engine of fertility decline in the absence of industrialization. Closer to home, our study further builds on two articles uh, recently published in this journal. The first, by Alexander Metcalf, investigates the World Health Organization post war engagement with new media technologies and public information strategies to educate people and help fight diseases. Early failures and disappointments promoted the WHO to questions whether its media expenditures were justified and to revise its strategies. Ultimately, Metcalf concludes the WHO acknowledged uh, the inadequacy of the one size fits all approach. Obviously, I mean, we're kind of doing that with big pharma and medication, though, so I mean, it's still happening. Metcalf's account aligns with those of variety of attempts to international health organizations to construct and reach a newly imagined and presumed illiterate global audience. The film was especially valued in this role, as Oster has shown, and within types of film, animation was prized for its supposed capacity to be more comprehensible to diverse audiences, as we shall see for family planning. The second article by Nicole Bordanas, Decentress, um, high politics and typically male population experts to bring into view the more intimate everyday practices of mid-level, typically female, international Planned Parenthood Federalist uh, Federation field workers in the 1950s. As is well known, family planning grew into multi-million-dollar international aid industry as it became entangled in Cold War and decolonialization geopolitics, and was powerfully championed by the Catholic Church. As an international project of modernization that crucially depended on medical knowledge, technology, and personnel, the biopolitical mission of family planning shared general features with that of the World Health. Yet, the idea of promoting small family size and non procreative sex was politically fraught, emotionally charged, and morally contested in specific ways. Uh, Bourdainais finds a heterogeneous range of motives, ideas, and communities involved, as does our analysis of family planning. So, this brings into focus the intersectional, like connected world that we live in, where when you put a one size fits all element into the world, it sort of disrupts everything. And so, for better or worse, like if somebody wanted it, sure. But I've read where in population goals, um, where people are looking to have these procedures, they will be denied it actually. So it's almost like, and they throw in elements of non consent on purpose. It's really weird. All right. As an intervention in the field of global history, this article investigates the centrality of mass media and mass communication to the project of international family planning from the perspectives of a range of actors. We expose some of the tensions, contradictions, and compromises that have been hiding beneath the surface of the 10-minute film. We show that family planning was, in some respects, in keeping with related films of the period. For instance, the Population Council set out to create a frank and detailed introduction to contraception, but struggled to balance narratives against this didacticism. Somebody in the comment section, tell me what that means. And ultimately censored, Disney fied their own film. The film was also drafted into anti communist politics of the Cold War and employed aesthetic strategies of depicting overcrowding that were in keeping with the genre. In other aspects, however, family planning departed from its contemporaries. This was an ambitious attempt at creating a globally distributed and universally legible advocacy film that could speak to all publics. To this end, the film's enormous budget embraced 1. An unusually expansive multilingual release with at least 2 dozen versions existing in various languages. 2. An intermedial production strategy with the film itself as just one component of the media suite that included some comic books, flip charts, and slides. And 3, a distinctive distribution program that relied on not only existing infrastructure, but also more informal and ad hoc modes of transportation and screenwriting. Despite the resources poured into the film and perhaps contrary to present day expectations, family planning, we argue, failed to connect with local audiences. All right, population council and mass communication. So, so it shouldn't be surprised that Disney is involved in these topics. Like old cartoons were not shy into leaning into World War II and random portrayals of Hitler when it came to Disney. Um, but Disney doing propaganda to reduce population seems pretty off brand, I would think. I guess not. Okay, moving on, because I just want to briefly touch on this. So, so to my main point, so I spoke of this a lot in some shorts, but tackling some of this is needed. Um, Aaron Sorkin, as I mentioned, the screenwriter for TV, has backed away from this comment, but he a few months ago suggested Democrats should vote for Mitt Romney to get Biden out. You can see where this is going. So, as the calls for Joe Biden to exit the 2024 presidential race continued, so to have the scenarios for what happens after that, Aaron Sorkin, the creator of West Wing, offered what would be the West Wing-esque path for the party. In an op-ed in the New York Times on Sunday, Sorkin wrote that there's something that the Democrats can do that would not just put a put a lump in people's throats with its appeal to stop Donald Trump at all cost unity, but with its originality and sense of sacrifice. So here's my pitch to the writers' room: the Democrat Party should pick a Republican. At that convention next month, the Democrats should nominate Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney, a Republican, is retiring from the Senate after this term, but has said that he is not voting for his party's nominee, Donald Trump. Sorkin's call for not for Romney as the nominee was greeted with some ridicule on social media as too much of a bit of fan fiction, but he defended his idea as clear and powerful demonstration that this election isn't about what our elections are usually about, but about stopping the deranged man from taking power. Surely, Mr. Romney, who doesn't have to be introduced to voters, would peel off enough Republicans' votes to win, probably by a lot, Sorkin wrote. Uh, the double haters would be turned into a single haters, and Nikki Haley voters would have somewhere to go. Miss Haley having disqualified herself when she endorsed the leader of an unsuccessful attempt to overthrow the government. The latest senator to call for Biden to withdraw is Senator Joe Manchin, who in Sunday shows interviews called for the president to pass the torch. He told Face the Nation, quote, "Before the convention, I believe there could be an open primary process and let the cream rise." He singled out the two Democratic governors in neighboring states, Andy Beshear of Kentucky and Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, as rising stars. Representative James Clyburn, though, said that he still supported Biden. Representative James Clyburn, though, said that he is still supporting Biden. Okay, he is still in the race. He will be our nominee if he stays in the race, Clyburn said. And I think all of us should look for ways to coalesce around the candidacy. Just total cope. And why would you just be like, oh, I guess I'm not going to support him anymore if he's out? Like, I guess who else is there, right? I mean, I guess that makes sense. It just sounds like, yeah, I like you when you're running, but not when you're not. Like, you should still like the guy. All right, getting off topic. All right, Sorkin wrote in his essay, part of the wish fulfillment of the West Wing was that oratory can be pervasive. So Barack Obama could come forth with a Democratic convention next month in Chicago, and remind us once again that we're not red states and blue states, but the United States by full throatedly endorsing his old rival. And Mr. Romney could make the case that the Democrats are putting country before party in ways that the MAGA movement will not, and announce his bipartisan cabinet picks at the convention as well. All right. That's clearly not happening. I mean, especially after this next thing. Like, people are still talking in terms of party. So, the ultimate irony is that Republicans are now voting for Kamala. We can see this as a realignment into turning red, while Trump's campaign seemed beyond the Republican values. Honestly, a fascist at this point, and we can see it. But Trump's power trip could be written in stone by the Supreme Court. So I didn't. This is the last video, the last research I did on this topic with Republicans voting for Kamala, but 111 Republican former officials endorse Harris, says Trump is unfit to serve. So, more than 100 Republican former lawmakers and officials endorse Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. The group argued that former President Donald Trump. Is it? Yeah, okay. The group includes former Trump administration officials, as well as officials who served under former President Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. So, in the letter shared by the Harris campaign Wednesday, 111 former national security and foreign policy officials said that despite their disagreements with the vice president's policies, quote, we believe that she possesses the essential qualities to serve as president, and Donald Trump does not. They decried Trump for sowing daily chaos in government during his first term in office, arguing that he put his personal interests before the country's and violating his oath of office by inciting the January 6, 2001 U.S. Capitol riot. The group, which includes former Trump administration officials as well as officials who served under former uh, President Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, also warned of Trump's susceptibility to flattery by foreign leaders. He is unfit to serve as president or indeed an office of public trust, they said in a letter which the New York Times first reported earlier Wednesday. The signatories include former CIA and FBI Director William Webster, former Director of the National Intelligence John uh, Negroponte, and former U.S. Trade Representative Carla Hills and Robert Zoellick. They acknowledged many Republican concerns about Harris and preference for Trump, but any potential concerns pale in comparison to Donald Trump's represent demonstrated chaos and unethical behavior and disregard for one's republic's time-tested principles of constitutional governance. They argued. Quote, his unpredictable nature is not the negotiating virtue he extols. To the contrary, in matters of national security, his demeanor invites equally erratic behavior from our advisories, which irresponsibly threatens reckless and dangerous global consequences. 8 former members of Congress also endorsed the Democratic ticket of Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz in the letter. Wednesday's letter marks the latest edition of GOP support for Harris, who has sought to appeal to more moderate voters and conservatives who may be disillusioned with Trump. I mean, it's not hard to be disillusioned with this guy, even if Kamala Harris is like kind of boring in comparison to how he speaks, and Trump can just say anything and be fiery. But I mean, it doesn't mean he's right for the job or that he's stable. All right. Her campaign in August launched a Republicans for Harris, touting endorsements from more than 2 dozen ex-Trump officials and other GOP members. In early September, Harris won the support of nearly 90 corporate leaders, including former 21st Century Fox CEO James Murdoch, Snap chairman Michael Linton, and Yelp CEO founder Jeremy Stoppelman. Dick Cheney and Vice President George W. Bush announced the same month that they would be voting for Harris. His daughter, former GOP Representative Liz Cheney, is one of Trump's loudest conservative critics. Meanwhile, Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence reaffirmed Tuesday that he would not endorse any presidential candidate in the 2024 election. Pence specifically referenced the events of January 6, 2021, when Trump pressed his then Vice President to reject the lawful election college, the lawful electoral college results showing President Joe Biden won the 2020 election. After Pence rebuffed Trump, a mob of then president supporters stormed the Capitol and derailed the election certification. Wednesday's letter included a quote from Pence, quote, anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. All right. Moving on here. So, as we've seen, like Trump is far too radical. Republicans just wanted to take away abortion rights and ruin women's lives. The national security issue, in terms of what Trump is doing, it's not about ruining the lives of women. So that was okay. That was like actually our democracy being ruined, and there were Republicans who were very concerned that that was happening. But as it stands with this, with the fascist Trump MAGA wing, it's it doesn't it's not it's untouchable with this. Like, all the Republicans wanted to do was take women's rights, and it just they went so far with it that they are the fascists now. And so, um, I guess everything before Trump became a national security threat, that's what Kamala is now. She's just under Trump because all the Republicans have pretty much put all their energy into her. And that's fascinating. All right. I'll see you in the next one.